All right. It is still Fired Up Friday.
Ooh.
And we are going to double dip today because my man Wayne has a special guest from far away.
Far, far away. Devin from Alaska.
Alaska.
Who I still use your old name, by the way. You're still in my phone with your old name.
It's like
So-
3 last names ago.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm like, this is Devin Thomas. They're like, I don't think it is. And I'm like, no, we're still going with it. So anyway, no, I'm excited. We're doubling down on Fire Friday, and
Yes.
that we have Devin with us. It's amazing.
And so, give us a little background here.
So Devin is the one that knows that all my stories are legit. They're like, were you really that bad? I was like, I was really that terrible. No, Devin and I have been in real estate for like longer than we probably want to admit, in Wasilla, Alaska. So we were both just agents slinging contracts a million years ago. And Devin was amazing since day one, whether she wants to admit it or not. Worked for some incredible agents, and now she owns Signature Alaska, which is an incredible brokerage in Alaska. She built the thing, her and your mom helped,
Yes.
but I like to give Devin all the credit, right? But no, they built this incredible brokerage with really incredible people and culture. So it's very cool to have her with us, and we've been coaching for I don't know how many years
Oh,
we've
so
been
coach
coaching
too.
together.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I opened Signature, one of the biggest things that I wanted to bring to our agents was I wanted them to be able to totally guide our training calendar and come to me and say, hey, this is what I think I need to be successful. And the very first thing they told me was social media. And the very first thing I thought was, shit, because I don't know about social media. And, you know, Big Brother watches you on your phone. And so Wayne's like, advertisement popped up and said, hey, take my social media strategy course. And so I was like, I'm going to sign up for that. I love Wayne, and I'm going to sign up for that, and I'm going to see what I can learn so I can bring that back to my people. And that's where it all started.
So now, when was this? Let's just timestamp this.
2018.
2018. So now you're already here.
I was here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So now I'm going to play ignorant Texas guy.
Okay.
So I know Alaska is technically bigger, right?
Yes.
2.5 times.
But who's counting?
Yeah.
So now, what kind of, like, okay, as the ignorant Texan, I do not associate Alaska with a market even big enough to have. I'm thinking like some shit like John Carpenter's The Thing, where everybody lives in like an outbuilding and it's frozen. So apparently that's not true.
Not true, but a majority of Alaska, yes, is
So now
not inhabited.
you're doing real estate. Is this like, okay, I know there's Anchorage.
Yes.
And, oh, that's it. That's the sum total of my Alaska trivia. So now, where are you? Oh, no, Juneau.
Yes, there's Juneau, and then there's Fairbanks. Those would be like the main communities. A little bit on the Kenai Peninsula, where it's like world-class fishing. But I'm about 45 minutes north of Anchorage.
All right. Okay. For those of you with Google Maps, check that out. So now, this is fascinating. Okay. So, population-wise, what are we talking here?
Alaska total?
No. Like,
Where
like,
I live?
Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, how does somebody be a agent, broker, or whatever?
It would be a lot like an Anna or something like that. What is it, 100,000?
It's like 100,000 people in like the general area where I live, which is
Okay.
considered the Matsu Valley.
Okay. Well, and again,
So they have like homes and roads and stoplights and
Schools.
and a Target. I mean, it's a legit place.
Cable TVs
Cable
coming
TV,
soon.
yes,
Coming
yes.
soon. So again, I'm playing the role of the backwards Texan here, the hillbilly. But okay, so like for example, I learned to drive in Keller, Texas, in the mid '80s, where there wasn't shit in Keller, Texas, in the mid '80s. However, out my bedroom window, I could see on the horizon that Fort Worth was actually a city. You know, so it's like I have a little bit of that where it's like, okay, you can drive for 45 minutes in one direction and there's nothing. However, if you go 45 minutes in the other direction from your house, there's actually a city. So I don't associate Alaska with that. I associate it with like,
I think we need to take you on a trip.
Yeah.
Right? We need to expand
Yeah.
your
You need to
horizons
come
a
up.
little bit. Yes. Yeah.
actually, it's funny. I traveled more in 2023 than I did the 10 years previously in the aggregate.
amazing.
You know, and it's all because of real estate and
There you go.
networking. Yeah, so there you go.
Very cool.
So, all right, so I learned a little bit today. So now we're going to go back to our original style gimmick. We're going to roll the slot machine here. We're going to get us a topic, and we're going to do with trust.
Ooh.
Trust.
Trust is the glue of life. It is the foundational principle that holds all relationships. Interesting.
Ooh,
So,
that's heavy.
yes. And so for me, and how it would relate to my business, and just you'll hear me say this a lot, where I figured out at one point in time that I was the bottleneck, and it took a lot to get there, where it was like, because of my imposter syndrome or my fear of being found out or whatever, I had a death grip on everything that came in and went out with my name on it. So I didn't trust anybody for shit. No. And the idea of even having an outsourced editor was verboten. That was like, no, because what if they don't, fill in the blank, and then they're going to think X. So like, that's my knee jerk for trust, is where I was such a, wow, that's 2 in a row that it came down to the imposter syndrome and like what I was.
I know. Stay tuned for our therapy session.
Yeah.
Coming up right next.
And the next topic will be everything Rick's afraid of. But so what pops into your head for trust as far as like our little universe here, like in business?
I think for me, the first thing that pops in my head when it comes to trust is like how long it takes to build and how quick it can be broken. Right? So like trust and verify, but how fast you can lose it. And I think especially like in the coaching space, for me, trust a lot of times is longevity. Like, are you playing the long game? Like, there's so many people that can look good for 5 minutes, but like playing the long game is how I think it's how we build a lot of trust nowadays with social media stuff. It's like, oh, he's been doing the same thing for X amount of time, like that. Like we build trust kind of in that way. It is, but I think there's a science to building trust too, which I think that like realtors do it with our clients, we do it with our teams. Like you've got to lean into how do I actually create this from nothing? So yeah. What about you, trust?
What comes to mind with trust? It's really trusting yourself. So I'm going to give a little plug for Wayne. I think coaching is invaluable. I can't imagine doing my business without it. Last week, when we had our coaching call, I was like, I'm going to go totally off grid with this. Is that okay? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, we went totally outside of business, and that was really cool, and it's really powerful for me to have that in a coach. Of course, I have to be able to trust my coach to be able to do that. But I think the most valuable thing for me that has came from Wayne is really to trust myself. I think that's one of the biggest skills we can learn as entrepreneurs is like really that self-trust, because we have to take a lot of risks. We have to do a lot of things where we don't know what it looks like on the other side, and it never turns out how we think it's going to turn out on the other side. And so we really have like building that self-trust is invaluable as an entrepreneur. Otherwise, you'll constantly get paralyzed by that imposter syndrome, by that, I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing that. Maybe I should really go work a corporate job or whatever, is really having that self-trust. And that is always a work in progress.
I love that you said that. It was interesting. Somebody asked Tony Robbins years ago, and I'll never forget. They go, "Why aren't people buying our product?" And they're like, "We have this amazing product. It's great. We know it works. Like we're not BSing anybody. Like this is amazing." And what Tony Robbins said was, he goes, "There's a lot of people that aren't buying your product, not because they don't trust the product, but because they don't trust themselves. So like they don't trust that they'll watch the thing. They don't trust that they'll implement. They don't trust that they'll do the stuff." And so I think it's so interesting you say that, because most people, and this is one of the reasons we ask, like at the beginning of almost every coach call, is like, what were your wins this week? And everybody's like, I don't know, I didn't have any. And I'm like, yeah, you might have had one, right? But like I gotta like dig in to find one, because I think that if we're first off, we do have to be able to trust ourselves. But second off, to your point, it's really interesting is I think we unconsciously erode trust in ourselves if we're not aware of it. Meaning, like we're only tallying where we dropped the ball, and we're not tallying some of the stuff we did well, right? And the analogy of that is, I remember somebody gave me this analogy one time of like, everything that happens is kind of like this thing we throw into a pond, and the pond's our mind. The good things we kind of let float to the bottom of the pond because we don't need to remember them. It's like, oh, that call was good. I nailed that coaching appointment, right? Like good, right? But the bad things, our unconscious mind keeps at the top of that pond because we never want to forget that, because we don't want to experience that pain again. So it's like, that's why you can, right? How many times you and I had an agent that made 100 calls, 99 were great, but they can't get over the one where the person yelled, or they dropped the ball, or they slurred their words, or whatever it is, right? Because like our mind's like, ooh, don't forget that thing. Right? Remember that one time you messed up, but all the good memories like float to the bottom. So if we're not aware of this, we don't have a process in place, we're like eroding our self-confidence, even if we are doing so many things right.
I love this. And I love the fact that, okay, this is the second time that I've had 2 coaches on. So it's like, I'm getting like, kapow, I'm getting like blasted.
We should just have Rick in the middle.
I know.
Like, let's talk about your childhood.
Yes. And like, what are you afraid of? So now, how do you get past that negativity bias? Because there's a part of it that's biological, where it's like,
Yeah.
you know, if you walked past the copse of trees back in the day and it was a tiger and you acted like it wasn't a tiger, well, everybody that did that, they got eaten, and so their ancestors aren't here to tell us about it. So, but we're all the byproduct and the evolutionary, you know, end of the line of all the people that were scared shitless of stuff and hedged against taking risks. And so, how do you like? Okay, so it's our very first. Oh, this is like free stuff. So like this is our very first call. How do you get somebody out of that thing where they're just paralyzed, where they don't trust anything, they second guess everything? How do you get past that sort of, or what's the beginning of the process to not second guess everything you do?
Yeah. Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
I think
I'm
there's a couple
second
things-
guessing myself on what I'm going to say right
well,
now.
I'm second guessing myself. So here's, I think that first off, I remember asking Minja one time, I was like, do you fake it till you make it? And she's like, well, you don't really fake it till you make it, but one of the most powerful things you can do is pull the energy of a past success into the present. So like, man, remember that time where you went on stage, you were scared out of your mind, but you went on and you did it anyway, and it worked out, right? So like, I can kind of pull that energy into the moment. So I think sometimes I have to help my clients be like, you know, hey, if you were able to do this, I know we're going to be able to figure this out. So like, give them some concrete evidence, right? Like you were able to deal with this in your life, right? Like, okay, you're going to be able to take this, so bring some of that in. And then I think the second thing is, like, sometimes you don't have to start with a huge thing. Sometimes start with some small wins, right? Like, write 2 cards, right? Like, get up 5 minutes earlier. Like let's start with little things and let's build the bricks over time. I think confidence is things that most people are looking for in a YouTube video or some bumper sticker. And I think a lot of times confidence is something that we have to build, you know, brick by brick by brick. And I think the two things, it takes maturity, because I think our mind wants to go like, I'm good or I'm bad, right? It wants to be very polar. And so I think it takes effective reflection. It's probably the best thing that I can give some of my clients sometimes is effective reflection,
I like that.
which isn't like it was a bad day or it was a good day. It's like, okay, what was good? You know, what did you do well? What did you not do so well? And what are we going to do different next time? So it's like effective reflection on, hey, some of it was really good. I think this part sucked, and like, here's what I'm going to do different next time. So getting out of like that monkey mind of just like terrible, good, right? All that BS that doesn't really serve us. So, but I'd love for you, Devin, like, what do you do, especially with new agents that come into your brokerage, and they're like, I'm scared, and you're kind of like, you should be, right? Like,
Yeah.
Right? I mean, don't be scared, right? But like, what do you do, especially with those new agents? Like, how do you build their confidence?
Well, one of the questions, I think I got it from you actually, is looking for proof of success in other parts of their life. And that really helps me kind of determine, like, are you cut out for this? Are you gritty enough for this? Because this is a gritty job. Like, there's a lot of glamour that social media puts on this job, but it is a gritty job. It's not glamorous. It might look glamorous. It is not the, you know, House Hunters or the Selling Sunset show, especially in Alaska. It's gritty. And so I'm looking for proof of success where they really were able to draw that grit out. And sometimes that's an ugly divorce that they made it through on the other side of. Sometimes that's like a weight loss journey, and just really helping them identify those spots throughout their life where they've had that proof of success, and knowing that they can take that same grittiness and apply it to real estate. And there's nothing harder than a nasty divorce, or you know, I've never had a 100-pound weight loss journey, but I can imagine that's very hard. So if they can do that, they can certainly do this.
Absolutely. And so, you know, I often talk about, you know, the recovery thing or whatever, having been sober for 19 years. And there's a lot of stuff in the world of the 12-step programs or whatever, where it's like this faith-based, and it's like, for me, that it's not teachable in the sense of, oh, just believe, just have faith or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Because at the end of the day, to tie it into what you guys were just saying, the faith aspect for me in anything is really just a math problem, where it's like, okay, I have been sober. Like, if you've been sober for 15 minutes, or if you've been doing anything for 15 minutes, you suck, or it sucks, or whatever, because it's all brand new.
Yeah.
And we have this sometimes misguided idea of like, if I'm not good at it right away, I don't want to do it. Or at least that's me.
Yeah,
you know, let
absolutely.
me tell myself. But a big part of it over time is, like I tell my guys, if you don't suck and you don't quit, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, well, if you suck, we can make you better. But if you quit, well, then that's on you.
Yeah.
You know, and then the faith becomes this math problem where it's like, I've done X, Y, and Z one time.
Yep.
in recovery, and I lived.
Yep.
You know, and that could be translated into anything, any kind of endeavor or business or whatever. Now I've done it twice,
Yeah.
and I survived both.
Yeah.
You know, and then over time it's like, okay, well now I've done this 17 times, or like what you said.
Yeah.
Okay, I've been on stage and had my ass handed to me or whatever. You know, and I have my experiences, and like, well, okay, if I've done it 100 times, there's always going to be one that's the worst.
Yeah.
Just mathematically,
Yeah,
there's going to
absolutely.
be something
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
the worst. But over time, that builds, and then I'm not sure, and it kind of it dovetails into the fake it till you make it, where like at some point in time you're not faking it anymore.
Right.
But I think for you guys being on the coach's side, I think a big gift that you give to folks is showing people that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, because one of the things, like even in the guys I sponsor or whatever, it's like, well, no, dude, you did, you know, they call with the
Yeah.
binary of like it either sucked or it was awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, whoo, that'll wear you out, bro.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
I love telling my clients, like, the first 500 calls you make are gonna be terrible. Like, let's just get them out of the way, right? And I remember years ago, there's this guy I was coaching, and he's like, he was brand new, and he wanted to make calls, but he didn't want to like mess up his own town, right? He's like, I'll make calls, but like I don't want to screw it up here at home, right? So like, cool, let's call this your first 500 calls. Let's call this other town, right? And the ironic thing was, a couple months later, he was really ticked off because he had all this business like an hour away, right? But it's because he just went into it like, these are just practice. Like, I'm just calling these people and saying, do you want to start a house? Like, he was terrible. But ironically, he actually started getting business an hour away. And he's like, well, I guess I should, right? But I think it's a big part of it. And then I think too, with imposter syndrome, you got to get out of like being so attached to the outcome and be like, instead of, am I an amazing speaker? It's like, man, I prepared the best I could. I got up there and I was authentic. I learned these 3 things. So it's more like, who am I as I go through it? Less of like, how are people interpreting me, or did I do it perfect? So I think that's one of the ways you go over imposter syndrome, is like, I'm not trying to be somebody else, right? I am being authentically me in this way. I'm stepping up. I'm doing the thing. I'm doing my best. So I think that's another way that we get through it.
Love it.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I think one of the things that draws me to Wayne is authenticity. I think anytime you get into like a coaching relationship with anyone, is like, you have to be willing to tell them your shit.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to, like, because then they say, okay, like at the end, like when a lot of coaches that I've dealt with in the past, like all you see is the end byproduct of like, you're awesome. And like Wayne said, then you're like, okay, I'm not them, so I suck. And you don't see like the progression along, you know. When I started selling real estate, I was 21 years old. I had a 4-year college degree, never worked a day in my life. I got married, had a kid, and got divorced in 18 months, and I was living with my parents wearing my mother's underwear. There is zero reason anyone should have bought a house from me. Zero. I didn't know the first thing about, buying a house, let alone selling one. And so, yeah, I had to go to people I didn't know that didn't know my story. And they don't see that today, unless I share my story and I'm truly authentically who share where I came from, they don't see that. And so you have to be willing to be open, especially if you want them to be open with you.
Absolutely. And in today's world, that is like, it's like this weird paradox of, people airing every bit of dirty laundry on the internet because they think they're being authentic. And it's like, no, dude, you're just like a self-absorbed jagoff. Like, what are you doing? Versus the idea of like, oh, I can't let anybody know this, that, or the other thing about me, because then they won't do what I think I need them to do.
Yeah. Well, one of the funny things, like, sell what you got, right? So I remember years ago, I had a mentor, and I was like, dude, what do I tell him? He's like, tell them that, like, you're going to give them everything you got because they're your only client. Right? And I remember going and I was like, I'm going to give you everything I got because you're my only. And they're like, oh, cool. That's awesome. We're getting 100%. And I was like, cool. Like, I just sold all I had, which was like, I don't have anybody else. Right? You're going to get all my attention.
I love that. Like, sell what you got.
Yeah.
That is, okay, I'm going to write that one down.
Yeah.
And, even on my end of there's so much that people do where it's trying to be perception management, where it's
Yes.
like, I think I need you to think of me in a certain way, and I think if I do this, you will. Even as simple as like bringing it back to real estate and a listing, it's like, if the primary bedroom is upstairs, let's not pretend that it's not.
Right.
You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
because all we're going to do is like, okay, we're going to make badass content and we're going to drive people there in droves, and then they're going to get there and they're going to be mad at you because they think you tricked them.
It's like the people that won't do videos. It's like they're gonna meet you at some point.
Right.
They're like, I don't like how I look. It's like, well, they're gonna at some point they're gonna meet you.
They're gonna see you.
Yeah.
That's the old thing too, where it's like, I hate how I look and how I sound, and it's like on camera, and it's like, well, unfortunately, that's how you look and sound in real life.
yeah. That's unfortunately you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lean into it. And so now, I love this whole thing of everybody's kind of like telling it. So, how do you get to where you actually trust yourself, where you actually stop? So like now, just to bring it, so like for me, in the world of who I am now versus like who I was 21 years ago, all of the same defects are still there. They no longer have a vote as far as, so like I still have the same thoughts and the same reactions or whatever, but how do you get yourself out of, like, I always say, like, okay, my first knee-jerk reaction to any situation is the ridiculous, like, alcoholic version of me that's just total chaos and insane. Now, that guy he's the head coach. And it was like, you know, he'd call an audible at the worst possible time. But now, still in the car, but he's in the trunk. He's no longer.
Exactly it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you guys like get folks to, like, for me, it had to have this external, like, life burns to the ground or whatever. So for folks that don't have that, how do they start into that path? Or like, how do you guys still experience that? Like, all of the old bad habits are still there.
Yeah, no, I've arrived. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I wasn't struggling with like this morning, so I don't know. Yeah, Devin, you want to take this away?
Yeah, same. I was like, why does anyone want to talk to me on a show? I think the same as like bringing it back to new agents, like looking for proofs of success and helping them draw that out of themselves. I have to do that with myself. Just a little over a year ago, I had this wild idea that I wanted to start Alaska Real Producers, and
I remember you calling me, and I'm like, "Oh, cool!" And now they're like,
yeah, you're like,
you already have 18 businesses. She's like, "Hold on, I have an idea." And whenever I get that, I'm like, "Oh God!" And
yeah, I remember, and like I had to, go back to when I opened Signature. It was a totally different financial model than we had seen in our market before. Ironically, lots of people have copied it since then. They told me it wouldn't work. They told me I'd be bankrupt. They told me agents wouldn't follow me. And I did it. We have 50 agents and we have 400 agents in our area. So I had to really go back and remember what I had already done, because it was very easy for me to say, okay, this is actually not a good idea. This won't work here. People are going to think this is weird. You're doing this. And I did have that. I mean, I had constant, like, that voice did not go away when I pulled the trigger and said, I'm doing this. The very first realtor I met with said, is your business failing? Why are you doing this? And
Ouch.
I thought, ooh, I shouldn't do this. And we are now like 9 issues in, and I absolutely know that I should be doing this. People love it. It is, honestly, it is my calling. I mean, the very best people I've met in my adult life have been from the real estate industry, and I get to be the ones to tell their story. So, I mean, it's an awesome experience for me. But if I didn't have that self-trust, if I wouldn't have went back to that experience where I opened Signature when everybody told me it was a bad idea, I should just stick with my managing broker position at a big franchise, I wouldn't have the experiences I have today, which are being surrounded by some of the coolest people I know.
And from the coach perspective, here's what I loved about it. Because at first I was like, who? Right, like we're taking on something else,
He was.
right? I was like, you're gonna have to sell me on this, right? But here's what I love. Like, first off, you got clear on how it was in alignment with where you ultimately wanted to go. It was like, hey, here's where I want to go. This is in alignment with that. So that was the first thing. It's like, okay, so this is not the side bunny trail. Like, this is actually in alignment.
I have a lot of those.
Ties in with so many other things you're doing. And what I love, too, is like, we sat down and was like, hey, when are you going to do it? How are you, like, you were also willing to, like, lay out. It wasn't just like, I'm doing it and you jumped. It was like, you laid out the plan. Like, here are my schedules. I'm going to do it. Here's what I'm going to need, right? And you methodically laid that stuff out, which is the point of, like, okay, I would bet on this, right? But like, you did that work. I think a lot of people, they think that just a hope and a dream is enough. And I'm like, I love that. Like, have the hope, have the dream. But then let's figure out what it's going to take. And are you willing to pay that price? What do we need to adjust? What are the pieces we need to figure out? And then go for it, right? So, and then grit has to come in and fill the gap. But yeah, you were clear on why you want to do this. You were clear on how this ties into where you want to go. And it's your version of radical unapologetic success, which is beautiful.
I love that. We're back to the radical, unapologetic success.
There we go.
And so just now I'm curious, and we'll wrap it here in a second, but I'm curious on the trust aspect of, now, I don't know about Alaska, but, you know, there may have been one or two times where agents in Dallas didn't necessarily want to trust each other and be in a room and gather and do. So like Wayne and I are both, you know, very tied to the Real Producers clan here. And it took a minute for me to be like, okay, what's the angle, you know, and then just to see the folks come in, and some of them have that sort of catty kind of competitive Shark Tank vibe. Now, I don't know what that looks like when you're starting it from scratch and be like, hey, do you want to come hang out with a bunch of other, agents? And that basically, do you want to come hang out with your competitors and have some, finger foods and some martinis? So did you get pushback on that, or?
So we're still building momentum, and we still have work to do.
I remember when you called someone like, I want to feature you on the magazine. They're like, no, thanks. I'm like, they have no idea what they're saying. No to.
Totally. And now people are calling me back and you're like, so what is this you're doing? Yeah. And I'm like, remember when you looked at me like I was ridiculous?
Love you. Per your request, I took you off the list.
Yeah. Submit, self-nominate on the website. It's building momentum, but at the same time, you find other ways to draw people in, martinis, free ones. That's a good one.
Realtors drink.
They do. There's a reason that there are AA meetings at the NAR conferences. Just knowing that I'm going to put people in the room, and eventually more people are going to get in the room, and more people are getting in the room. I just focus on the value. I don't really actually worry about who's going to show up. Otherwise, I will imposter myself to death. I'll sit in the car like shaking and rocking back and forth. Every single event, we've had 3 events. We're 9 issues in, and every single event, I drive to it thinking no one's showing up.
And you do. I love the fact that, I couldn't tell you how many things I've done that where it's like, oh, this is probably going to, this might be a disaster. This might totally suck, but I'm going anyhow. Mm-hmm. And what do you say? Let grit fill the gap.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so, any final thoughts, Wayne?
Man, I think the final thought too is just a side note on that was I remember years ago when we were building the office, and sometimes we people would want to come join us. I'm like, they're a jerk. Like, why would we let them in the space? You know what I mean? And I remember one of my mentors back in the day said. He said, judge me on who we keep, not who we hire. He's like, we'll hire people, and then judge us on who we keep. Because some of these people have just been in a really crappy environment. And I remember, 15, 20 years ago, there were some offices, like you walk in, there's like door closed, secrets hidden away, like nobody talked to anybody, you know what I mean? And I think over the years we've created a different culture in a lot of spaces, but sometimes like that was just their culture. And we judged the person not really understanding the environment that they've been in. So when they came to this environment, they're like, oh my gosh, we share and it's abundance and it's all the good. So I give everybody, here's my thing. I give no judgment with discernment. So no judgment with discernment means like, I'm not going to judge you for where you are, and I'll let you in, and I'll give you a shot, whatever it is. But then I'm going to be discerning, right? If you actually are a jerk, right? We're going to let you find a different boat, right? But I think it's being open with discernment is a big piece of that, which comes down to trust.
Dude, we are like kicking out the catchphrases and the takeaways. I love it.
He's got T-shirts made in the car.
There you go. By the way, if you are a team leader, we do have that coming up at the end of next month. We've got our team leader training, which is, I did a video with this last night, which I was like, I was terrible. I was such a bad leader. Devin, I'm sure, can attest to all of my mistakes along the way. I was a terrible leader. Like, I wanted it. I had the right mind. I was like, I love this. I want to help you. I want to build a team. I want leverage. But I was a disaster. But back to your point, it's like I had all the heart, but none of the tools. Right? I didn't have the tools and the systems and the processes. So that's what, I think both of us right now, it's what we do is great people come in, and then we want to equip them with the tools and the things to really help them be themselves. So that's why you do what you do. That's why I do what I do. That's why we're doing the team leader training, everything to equip so
right
that they
on.
actually have it.
Any final thoughts from Alaska?
Just that self-trust is like knowing like when you're about to take a huge risk, like look for other parts of your life where you were like, I don't know how to deal with this, and you got through it. And just take the leap. If it's the right thing to do, you will know. You will know in your heart. And it's like, don't let all that other noise talk you out of it.
Love it. And then I will close out with the benefits of coaching and the objective point of view of somebody who is not emotionally tied to whatever it is that you're doing. And especially, like you said, after you tell on yourself and they know your shit, that is a game changer.
Yeah.
And well, thanks, guys.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.
And that's it. We'll have Peter take us out one more time.